Margaret's voice pierced through the room as she asked Sophia whether she'd purchased her outfit from a bargain shop. The sound of her ridicule echoed around the table, with everyone joining in the mockery. Alexander simply kept his gaze downward, offering no support to his spouse, allowing her to appear as though she were merely clinging desperately to her wealthy in-laws. While the group continued their amusement, Sophia remained composed, lifting her mobile device and tapping the screen. The display illuminated with a message. Arcadia Capital had just pulled out $1 billion from the Blackwood Group. The ridicule ceased immediately, and the Blackwood dynasty crumbled during that very meal. The events had begun hours before, when Sophia examined her wardrobe, studying the row of modest garments hanging there. She selected a simple navy dress that fell to her knees without any embellishments. Her fingers ran across the material, pausing briefly before she put it on. She applied no cosmetics and gathered her hair into a simple bun at the nape of her neck. Looking at her reflection, her expression appeared gentle yet resolute, like someone accustomed to bearing burdens silently. Impressing others wasn't her goal. It never had been. However, that particular evening, as she entered the Blackwood mansion, the atmosphere seemed unusually oppressive. The crystal fixtures sparkled, the stone flooring gleamed, and the attendees adorned in luxury brands turned to observe her. Their attention wasn't admiring, but evaluative. Their stares lingered on her outfit, her unadorned footwear, and the way she carried her small bag without any designer label. She experienced that recognizable sensation of being judged, yet she maintained her composure and walked with confidence. While Sophia made her way across the entrance hall, a younger woman wearing a shimmering green gown with elaborately styled hair positioned herself in Sophia's path. This was Vanessa, a society figure who flourished on recognition, her expression as cutting as her high heels. She greeted Sophia with exaggerated surprise, her volume calculated to attract observers. She claimed she'd nearly overlooked Sophia, suggesting she blended into the surroundings. Those nearby chuckled, glancing between the two women. Vanessa moved closer, her fragrance overpowering, suggesting that Sophia should perhaps borrow clothing from Margaret's collection next time to appear more suitable. Sophia's grip on her bag tightened, but she showed no other reaction. She looked directly at Vanessa, responding calmly that she was precisely where she should be. Vanessa's expression wavered momentarily before she laughed dismissively, though the crowd's amusement seemed artificial, as though they detected something unspoken. The banquet hall displayed tremendous wealth. Gentlemen wore custom-tailored garments. Ladies wore sparkling jewels around their throats, all congregating around lengthy tables draped in pristine white fabric. Sophia sat beside Alexander, who scarcely acknowledged her presence. He occupied himself with his sleeve fasteners, his expression tense, appearing as though he wished to be elsewhere. Margaret, his parent, occupied the prominent position at the table's end, her silver locks arranged elegantly, her crimson lip color striking like a weapon. She possessed the ability to make any space feel constricting with merely a glance. Henry Cross, the family's legal counsel, sat opposite Sophia. His necktie appeared overly constricting, his expression practiced and smug. Additional family members surrounded them. A relative with artificial laughter, a family member constantly checking his device, a business colleague whose expensive timepiece demanded notice. They all shared that same quality of entitlement and untouchability, secure in their elevated position. Margaret initiated the verbal assault, remarking on Sophia's dress and questioning whether it came from a second-hand store. Her amusement was theatrical and performative, prompting the entire table to follow suit. Attention turned toward Sophia, expressions gleaming with entertainment. A woman wearing sequined clothing leaned in, her tone dripping with false sweetness, commenting on how charming and quaint it was, questioning whether Sophia had created the garment herself. The aunt, her pearl necklace making sounds as she reached for her beverage, contributed by suggesting Sophia must have married Alexander for financial reasons, questioning what other motivation could exist. The ridicule intensified. becoming sharper. Sophia's fingers clenched her cloth napkin more firmly, yet her expression remained tranquil. She showed no discomfort, simply regarding the aunt with steady eyes and questioning whether that was her understanding of matrimony's purpose. A brief silence fell over the gathering. Then Margaret dismissed it, laughing more forcefully to override the moment. As the initial course was served, a gentleman in a dark gray suit, Richard, some investment professional with a perpetual sneer, positioned himself across the table. His volume was intentional, meant to carry throughout the room. He addressed Sophia, questioning whether she understood financial instruments or simply pretended to comprehend when Alexander discussed business matters. The table responded with amusement, several attendees sharing meaningful glances. Richard reclined, rotating his wine glass, anticipating her struggle. Sophia placed her utensil down with deliberate movements and met his gaze. Her response was soft yet distinct, indicating she understood enough to know his recent business venture had failed. The atmosphere froze, Richard's complexion reddening as several gasps punctured the stillness. He attempted to respond but remained silent. His arrogance vanished. Sophia retrieved her utensil, sipping her soup as though nothing unusual had occurred, while the table shifted with discomfort. Henry Cross leaned backward in his seat, his manner oily and smooth. He suggested that genuine affection would have prompted Sophia to provide Alexander with a superior anniversary present, questioning what last year's gift had been. When someone mentioned it was a book, he expressed amusement, and the gathering erupted once more. Alexander repositioned himself, his complexion flushed, yet he remained silent, offering only a feeble smile as though participating in the jest. Sophia's mouth pressed together momentarily before she lifted her eating utensil and slowly consumed some of her salad. The atmosphere continued, the mockery intensifying like an approaching wave. A relative wearing a velvet jacket leaned over, informing Sophia that she needn't try so strenuously to belong, that remaining in her designated position was acceptable. The statement struck like a physical blow, but Sophia showed no response. She positioned her utensil down with precision and regarded him, her tone gentle, yet sufficiently sharp to make him hesitate. She questioned what he meant by her lane. The table responded with laughter again, though it now carried nervousness and irregularity. While servers delivered the primary course, a woman identified as Claire, a fashion publication editor with pinched features and a designer accessory around her neck, angled toward Sophia. She mentioned knowing of a charitable thrift establishment she could suggest, noting they carried garments that might accommodate Sophia's financial limitations. Her manner was entirely false kindness, though her gaze remained frigid and calculating. The gathering tittered, some concealing their amusement behind their napkins, and Sophia halted, her cutting instrument hovering above her dish. She observed Claire, her expression impossible to interpret, and stated that she dressed for her own satisfaction, not for others' endorsement. Claire's expression became rigid, her accessory suddenly appearing constrictive. The table's amusement diminished, replaced by several uncomfortable throat clearings. Sophia cut into her meat, her action steady, as though she hadn't just transformed the atmosphere's energy completely. The meal continued in this pattern, each remark cutting more deeply. Margaret, elevating her wine container, inquired about Sophia's family background, questioning whether they were agricultural workers or retail operators. The gathering roared with laughter. A gentleman in a striped suit, some investment professional, contributed that she'd likely never witnessed $1 million throughout her existence. Sophia's hand paused on her beverage container, her knuckles briefly whitening. She regarded him with unwavering eyes and responded that he might be astonished. The gentleman laughed, though it seemed forced, and several individuals repositioned themselves in their seats. Alexander, maintaining his silence, reached for his water, his hands trembling slightly. The atmosphere was beginning to resemble a vessel under extreme pressure, thick with cruelty and something else, something nobody could precisely identify. Midway through the sweet course, an eager and overconfident young media professional extended a recording device toward Sophia, requesting commentary on speculation that she was merely pursuing wealth. His expression was self-satisfied, as though he'd already composed his article. The gathering leaned in, anticipating her to falter. Sophia positioned her dessert utensil down, her gaze locking onto his. She calmly stated he could write whatever he wished, as truth required no authorization from her. The journalist blinked, his device lower, somewhat. Several attendees exchanged glances, their smugness fading. Sophia consumed her coffee, her hands unwavering, while the journalist fumbled with his documentation, suddenly uncertain of his approach. Sophia's mobile device rested on the table, its display dark. She hadn't interacted with it throughout the evening, even when alerts vibrated softly. However, now, as Margaret launched into another narrative about the Blackwood family's latest transaction, a billion-dollar consolidation that would be transformative, she proclaimed, Sophia's fingers contacted the device. She didn't retrieve it immediately. She simply allowed her hand to remain there, as though anticipating something. Margaret observed this, her eyes narrowing. She questioned what Sophia was doing, mockingly suggesting she was reviewing discount vouchers. The table responded with amusement again, though it was beginning to seem rehearsed, as though everyone was performing roles in a narrative they didn't fully comprehend. Sophia smiled, just a slight curve of her mouth, and remarked how fascinating the billion-dollar figure was. Her tone was tranquil, perhaps excessively so, causing the atmosphere to pause. Margaret disliked that pause. She leaned in, her tone sharp, questioning what someone like Sophia could possibly understand about such figures. The gathering waited, expecting Sophia to diminish. Instead, she regarded Margaret with clear eyes and responded that she understood more than anticipated. The laughter resumed, loud and derisive. However, it had changed now. Several individuals glanced at each other with uncertainty. Henry Cross coughed, adjusting his neckwear. The aunt rolled her eyes, muttering about delusions. Yet Sophia simply reclined in her seat, her hands folded in her lap, as though observing a performance whose conclusion she already knew. As the evening progressed, a gentleman named Gregory, a board member with a resonant voice and golden timepiece, rose to celebrate the Blackwood heritage. His address was filled with bravado, commending Margaret's foresight and Alexander's prospects. Then he turned toward Sophia with a patronizing smile, acknowledging her as someone who keeps Alexander company. The atmosphere burst with laughter, beverage containers clinking. Sophia's expression remained unchanged, though her fingers tapped once on the table, a small, controlled gesture. She rose, her seat barely producing sound, and elevated her glass. She toasted to legacies, her voice clear, and to those who genuinely construct them. The atmosphere became quiet, Gregory's expression slipping. He sat down, his celebration forgotten, as Sophia lowered her glass without drinking. The dining vessels were removed, and the discussion shifted to the Blackwood dynasty. Margaret was in her element, discussing market valuations, executive decisions, the type of influence that commanded attention. She inquired, her voice resonating, about the actual wealth Sophia's family possessed. The inquiry was designed to trap, and everyone recognized it. The attendees laughed, some covering their mouths, others not bothering to conceal it. Alexander observed his dish, his jaw tense, and nodded slightly. He whispered, barely audible, that perhaps his mother was correct. The betrayal hung in the air, substantial and cold. Sophia's gaze flickered toward him momentarily before she looked elsewhere. Henry Cross interjected, his manner cutting, telling Sophia she didn't deserve to be associated with a Blackwood, questioning whether she understood that. The atmosphere awaited her collapse. Instead, she regarded him with icy eyes and said nothing. In a quieter instant, as servers refilled beverages, a woman named Lillian, an art merchant with a Shah, RP hairstyle and sharper tongue, angled toward Sophia. She suggested Sophia must feel displaced in this environment, her voice low but sufficiently loud for nearby attendees to hear. She noted that all this wealth and influence wasn't meant for everyone. Her smile was thin, as though she was doing Sophia a favor by highlighting this. Sophia rotated her head slowly, meeting Lillian's gaze. She remarked how amusing it was, her voice soft, that she felt completely comfortable. Lillian's smile froze, her fingers tightening around her container. The nearby guests shifted, their conversation halting, as Sophia turned back to her dish, her expression calm but unwavering. The silence carried more weight than the laughter had. Sophia reached for her mobile device, her movement slow and deliberate. She unlocked it, her thumb navigating the display with quiet confidence. The atmosphere didn't notice initially. They were too occupied with chuckling, whispering, circulating another serving of wine. However, then the large display at the chamber's front flickered. A message materialized, bold and unmistakable. Sophia Lane, proprietor of Arcadia Capital. The laughter ceased as though someone had severed a connection. Eating utensils clinked against dishes. A beverage container tipped, spilling crimson liquid across the table. Henry Cross became motionless, his mouth partially open. The media professionals in the atmosphere, invited to document the Blackwoods' significant evening, scrambled for their devices, their cameras. Sophia positioned her device down and stated that this was merely the beginning. Her voice was steady, as though she was presenting a fact. Margaret's complexion became pale. She screamed that it was impossible, her voice cracking, calling Sophia merely a parasite. Henry interjected, his hands trembling as he gestured toward the display, claiming those holdings were purchased for someone else, that she wasn't the proprietor. An uncle, his complexion red from excessive wine consumption, contributed that even if she was a shareholder, she was still just a woman. The atmosphere laughed, but it was desperate now, as though they were attempting to claw their way back to control. Alexander rose, his seat scraping the floor. He declared, his voice shaking, that he never required her money. Sophia didn't look at him. She simply lifted her beverage container, took a drink, and positioned it down with a soft sound. As the atmosphere grappled with the revelation, a server dropped a serving tray, the crash reverberating in the stunned silence. Attention turned, and in that instant, a woman named Diane, a public relations consultant with a polished smile and a reputation for managing crises, stood up. She addressed Sophia, suggesting they shouldn't overreact, her voice smooth but desperate, calling it all a misunderstanding that they could resolve together. She gestured toward the display as though she could dismiss it. Sophia tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. She questioned what working together meant, her tone so calm it sent a chill through the atmosphere. She stated she didn't collaborate with people who didn't see her. Diane sat down, her smile crumbling as the journalist documented everything furiously, capturing every word. The atmosphere was unraveling. Attendees whispered, their voices sharp with panic. A woman in a golden gown dropped her utensil, her hands trembling. Sophia's device buzzed again, and she glanced at it, her expression unreadable. She pressed a control, and the display changed. Arcadia Capital had withdrawn its entire $1 billion investment. The statement hit like an explosion. The market indicator on another display began to plummet, crimson numbers flashing like alarm signals. Attendees gasped, some rising, others reaching for their devices. Margaret collapsed, set into her seat, her hands gripping the table. Alexander simply stared, his expression blank, as though he couldn't process what was occurring. Sophia rose, smoothing her garment, and remarked that she'd mentioned it was fascinating. In the chaos, a gentleman named Paul, a technology investor with a loud laugh and louder opinions, attempted to regain control. He rose, elevating his voice over the murmurs. He challenged Sophia, calling it merely theatrics, claiming she lacked the courage to destroy a company like this. His laughter was forced, his eyes darting to the plummeting market indicator. Sophia turned toward him, her movement slow and deliberate. She questioned his use of the word courage, her voice cutting through the noise. She stated she'd constructed Arcadia from nothing, questioning what he'd built recently. Paul's expression went slack, his laughter dying in his throat. The atmosphere watched, stunned, as Sophia adjusted her bag and stepped away from the table, her presence commanding every eye. The atmosphere was chaotic. Individuals were shouting, arguing, attempting to make communications. Margaret's voice cut through, elevated and desperate, apologizing to Sophia and pleading for the family to receive another opportunity. Henry was next, his complexion slick with perspiration, suggesting they could renegotiate and repair the situation. Alexander grasped her hand, his grip excessively tight, claiming he still loved her and begging her not to leave. An attendee, some technology magnate with an artificial tan, attempted flattery, claiming Sophia had always belonged among them. She regarded them, her expression blank, as though seeing them for the first time. She freed her hand, retrieved her bag, and began walking toward the exit. The atmosphere watched, silent, as her footwear clicked against the stone flooring. As Sophia approached the exit, a woman named Elise, a corporate attorney with a reputation for ruthlessness, called out, questioning whether Sophia thought she'd won, claiming this small stunt wouldn't endure and that she'd be forgotten within a week. Her tone was venomous, her eyes flashing with defiance. Sophia halted, her hand on the entrance frame. She rotated slightly, just enough to meet Elise's gaze. She quietly repeated the word, forgotten, her voice so soft it forced the atmosphere to lean in. She suggested checking portfolios the following day. Elise's complexion paled, her bravado crumbling as Sophia departed, leaving the threat suspended in the air like smoke. Sophia didn't halt. She didn't turn back, but the information was already spreading. Devices buzzed, alerts pinged. A journalist shouted that it was on social media, that Blackwood Group was finished. The display showed a headline, "The humiliated spouse destroys her husband's dynasty." Attendees began leaving, their complexions pale, their voices low. A woman in an animal fur coat whispered that Sophia had manipulated them all. Another, a banker with a pinched complexion, muttered that this was a catastrophe. Sophia continued walking, her shoulders straight, her pace steady. She didn't need to say anything. The truth was communicating for her. Outside, the air was cool, the night quiet. Sophia stood on the steps, her breath visible in the chilly air. A vehicle pulled up, an old sedan, nothing like the sleek limousines parked nearby. She paused, her hand on the door, and glanced at a small photograph tucked into her bag. It showed her mother smiling, standing in front of a tiny house with a garden. Sophia's fingers lingered on the photograph, her expression softening for just a moment. Then she closed the bag, entered the vehicle, and drove away. The memory faded as quickly as it came, but it left a weight in the air, a reminder of her origins and what she'd carried. Back inside, the Blackwoods were falling apart. Margaret was on the phone screaming at someone, her voice hysterical. Henry was pacing, his neckwear undone, muttering about legal action. Alexander sat alone at the table, his head in his hands. The attendees who remained were whispering, their alliances shifting like sand. A young woman, some social media influencer with millions of followers, posted a video online calling out Margaret's cruelty. It went viral within minutes, the comments flooding with support for Sophia. The aunt, the one with the pearls, received a communication from her sponsor. They were withdrawing. The cousin, the one with the velvet jacket, was already trending for all the wrong reasons, his smug face plastered across social media. In the days that followed, Sophia was in a boardroom, her presence quiet but undeniable. A gentleman named Victor, a rival executive with a nervous habit of tapping his writing instrument, hesitated before speaking. He addressed her formally, admitting they underestimated her, his voice low. The other executives nodded, their eyes avoiding hers. Sophia leaned forward, her hands folded on the table. She stated matter-of-factly that most people do. She slid a contract across the table, her signature already on it. Victor took it, his hands unsteady, and the atmosphere exhaled as though they had been holding their breath. Sophia didn't smile. She simply nodded, her authority filling the space without a single raised voice. Sophia didn't witness any of it. She was in her vehicle, driving through the city, the lights blurring past. Her device buzzed again, but she didn't check it. Instead, she pulled into a quiet diner, the type with flickering neon signs and sticky tables. She ordered a coffee, black, and sat by the window watching the street. A gentleman walked in, his suit expensive but understated, his expression kind but serious. He slid into the booth across from her, positioning a folder on the table. He stated she'd accomplished it, his voice low. Arcadia had signed with them. Sophia nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. She simply said, "Good," and that was all. The gentleman, Ethan, CEO of the rival company, had been observing Sophia for years, not merely as a business partner, but as something more. He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. He stated she didn't have to do it alone. She regarded him, her eyes softening, but she didn't withdraw her hand. She responded that she did, her voice quiet but firm, but added that she wasn't alone now. Ethan smiled, just a small one, and the moment felt like a promise, something genuine and steady amid the chaos. The following day, the information was everywhere. Blackwood Group was delisted, its holdings worthless. Margaret's image was on every outlet, her dynasty in ruins. Henry was terminated, his name blacklisted in every major firm. The aunt's sponsorships dried up, her social circle shrinking by the hour. Alexander was photographed departing the estate, his luggage packed, his expression hollow. Sophia didn't watch the coverage. She was in a meeting, signing documents, her signature sharp and precise. The atmosphere was full of executives, all deferring to her, their voices respectful, their eyes careful. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply performed her work, her presence filling the space. Weeks later, at another event, the atmosphere was different. Individuals whispered her name, not with mockery, but with awe. She walked in, still in a simple dress, still without cosmetics. However, nobody laughed now. A media professional approached, hesitant, requesting a comment. Sophia regarded her, her eyes calm, and stated she didn't have one. The reporter nodded, stepping back as though she had just encountered someone untouched. Abel. Ethan was there, standing a few feet away, observing her with quiet pride. The atmosphere felt alive, electric, as though everyone knew they were witnessing something rare. However, the Blackwoods weren't finished. At one final gathering, a desperate attempt to salvage reputation, Margaret rose, her voice trembling. She declared Sophia would die alone, that nobody loved her. Henry, his career in ruins, contributed that people only followed her for her wealth. Alexander, his eyes red, whispered that she'd regret this. An attendee, some fading socialite, chimed in that the cold CEO would never be happy. The atmosphere went still, waiting for Sophia to break. She didn't. She stood there, her hands steady, her expression unreadable. She regarded them one by one, then turned to leave. The silence was deafening. At the back of the atmosphere, Ethan stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice, didn't create a scene. He simply took her hand and stated they weren't merely partners. He wanted to build a genuine family with her. The reporters went wild, cameras flashing, devices recording. Sophia didn't smile, but her eyes softened, and she squeezed his hand. The atmosphere erupted in applause, not for show, but for her, for the woman who'd walked through fire and emerged whole. She departed with Ethan, her steps steady, her head elevated. The Blackwoods stood there, broken, their dynasty gone, their voices silenced. Sophia continued moving forward. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The truth had performed its work, and she was free. For everyone who's ever been judged, overlooked, or silenced, this was her moment. It wasn't loud, it wasn't vengeful, it was simply true. And that truth was enough. Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.